In jubilation, thousands of peasants converge on the town of Silti in southern Ethiopia to celebrate the revolution, their liberation. Many of them have travelled more than 30 miles by foot or on horse. It's the first time in their lives that such a gathering has taken place. After 3,000 years of feudal oppression, this day is an assertion of their rights, a statement of their belief in the revolution. Elation at the present is married to anger at the past. The horsemen charge for joy and to symbolize the hunt for the landlords. Ethiopia now belongs to the peasants. The landlords have lost their land. But the revolution spills blood. Peasants and landlords have fought pitched battles, the spears of the revolution against the guns of reaction. On both sides, many have died. Yet, in the 6 months since land reform was declared, 2/3 of the population, more than 15 million people, have been enrolled in peasant associations which now control most of rural Ethiopia. No revolution in the history of the world has moved so fast. Spontaneously, the poorest peasants, who own nothing, chanting a song of the revolution, dig symbolically at the earth, which last year they worked for the landlord, which this year belongs to them. Women, who were slaves not only of the landlord, but of their husbands, who were forbidden to appear in public, celebrate their liberation too. Like the men, every woman in Ethiopia is now entitled to a share of the land. In the past, peasants grew maize for the landlord to sell. The landlord grew rich, the peasants hungry. Now the maize is theirs. The tanners of hide, despised by all, emerge from their shame to display their craft in pride. The delicate skills of the women were despised too. They worked in their huts unseen. Married at the age of 10 and rejected, divorced on a whim by the age of 20, they now assert their right to dignity and respect. The red star of revolution has reached the countryside. For some, it proclaims a socialist future. For most, simply, landlords beware. Banners name scores of villages, like Hagadole, Dili and Warobi, from which the peasants come, forgotten places that appear on no maps. They proclaim slogans too. Land to the tiller, down with the landlord. There are no serfs now. We must struggle for freedom. The guardians of this peasant revolution are students. 65,000 of them sent out from the capital and now scattered through the country to preach the message of the revolution. Shot at, sometimes killed by rebel landlords, they're followed without question by the peasants. They're now the most powerful, most radical political force in Ethiopia. After hours of celebration, there are speeches. The peasants' leader, elected by his people in secret ballot, reads a poem he's written for this day. It's a plea for the future. Once, he says, we died of hunger, we suffered poverty, we were ignored, we were oppressed. Oh landlords, he says, do not fight us, forget the past, let's work together. Then he warns, let those who will not join us be put to the sword. Those who wish Ethiopia ill, let them be destroyed. Ethiopia's rush towards socialism is haphazard. The peasants and the students make their own laws. Their revolution is so radical that sometimes they find themselves fighting the police and the bureaucracy who hold up their progress. Critics who don't like what's happening claim that the revolution is loosing anarchy upon the land. The ministers of land reform and agriculture are typical products of the revolution, emerging from nowhere to hold office for the first time. The leaders of the old regime were executed or imprisoned. The new men share the elation of the peasants.
It was a thrill for them, and it was a thrill for me to watch them do this thing. It can't possibly go wrong with all this excitement and participation by the people. After all, the whole revolution is for the people and by the people.
Are you worried at the speed at which the revolution is taking place in the country?
The speed I don't know, but I have been operating in the field of agriculture for the last over 17 years anyway.
You were a manager of a farm?
I was a manager of a farm, and I had worked with the farmers. Someday, I knew it was going to come, because no population could have gone through what they have gone through in this country without having to resort to such a thing. It had to come. If people had to go to bed hungry, they must do something about it. If government was not prepared to give it to them, then I feel it's only human to reach and get it.
A lot of people from outside, hearing about what's happening in the country, knowing that there are a lot of struggles and battles, say that there's no law and order to the revolution. What's your reaction to that?
You know, law and order, if we take it, in the traditional terms, particularly in the Western sense, doing what the peasants want to be done might be, in contravention to law and order. But what we intend to introduce is a revolutionary, legality, not the Western concept of law and order. Sending cops all over the country to really, punish the peasants for doing what they are doing. What we intend to introduce is really revolutionary legality in this country.
You speak as if there is still a bureaucracy and a police who are, in a sense, holding up the development of the revolution.
Definitely. Of course, in a socialist context, the first thing to be tackled is to really, junk all the previous, penal provisions, which used to really punish people who stood strong in defense of their rights. We can't really go that way at this particular moment. Everything which goes against the interests of the peasantry, against the mass, has to be junked.
What you're saying is that a Western concept of law and order is really quite irrelevant.
Irrelevant in this context.
For centuries, village life in Ethiopia did not change. Here, a few miles from the peasants' rally, the people still live on the edge of starvation. The village is governed by the struggle against hunger. The staple food is inset, from which the peasants make a kind of dough, which leaves them malnourished, and of which in any case there is never enough. The region lacks water. In the dry season, women make a 5-hour journey to this spring to collect a day's supply of water for the family, a walk of 10 hours every day. The water holds dirty and breeds disease. In Ethiopia, 80% of the people have no access to medicine. The sick cure themselves or die. Hard work makes young people old by the age of 30. In a country where the average income is a little over £20 a year, most of the peasants earn nothing. They work to survive, and life is short. To live past the age of 40 is to defy the odds against survival. To succeed, the revolution must end such misery.
Would you ask the old man first, please, Kadir, what it was like here, living under the control of the landlord?
ድሮ ባለባቲ ጥሽ በናራ ወቅት አኩለውጥ ይታይመጭ ቀዳ አይነ ኮንት ነብሩ ናራ ይባረታም አይነ ኮን
ዮሐንስ ወቅት ምንሳል
አኖ ነው ወቀሳ ግድለ ምንሳል the what is to be asked about our condition in the past, our suffering we have been undergoing.
ሀድ በቃ ሀድ እንደራሴ ያኛን ግዛሽ ነው
for he says everything we have. everything we have, we used to give it to the landlord. We used to work for him, and we used to give in cash as well as in kind to the landlord, besides giving our labor. I mean, working, farming for him.
Did they do that with fear? Were they frightened of the landlord, or did they just know that he was very powerful and therefore that was the system and they had to obey him?
لوهت تاززوني ناري وان بفروتن ويالي وقتي منغستي لون تبعمونن ويوان لتفرم يعني
وان بكسراش منغستي عالم كلش منغستيت ما جيجينا
we never knew about the existence of a government. We were just afraid of him. Nobody was here to take us to the government.
They didn't know about the government?
They didn't know. They said they were not aware of the existence of a government because they only know the landlord.
ያግድግር ያለ ውሳኔ በቃ አይዳጅጋ ያግዲ
We were never taken. We were not allowed to go beyond the warada. If we
That's out of the local district.
out of the local district, if we go beyond that, you just tie us and we were used to slash. We were being slashed by
Beaten.
the land, beaten by the landlord.
So you didn't go out of the village, out of the area at all?
No, never.
How do they think the situation is changed now?
أكو يالي جز وقت تغير يتغير عينك يتغير مثلا
لا 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 اكو شكر لغوشتنا مستقن لي سجدنا مني وكاني كش ليل ونهار لي لسجدوا انا نقول
So he's saying that this is thanks to God that we have got to pray day and night for what has come this time. At least our voice is being heard now. It is not being buried. Our voice is being heard. One, the second thing is now we are at rest. We are no longer nagged by the landlord and such.
ولي أوجي كان أباكم بران إنداتكم دفران.
In the past we were ignorant. We never knew about our rights. Now we are aware of our rights, and that not only men but also women and all of us know our rights that we go and demand.
ما يمدم تمارين مرتكي دارا مدم
What is she saying, the old lady?
The old lady is saying that we have been kept under, we were buried, and now even to talk, what do we have to talk? Are we educated? Are we learned? So we are ignorant. What do you ask us to speak? So it was dark for us. What do you have to ask? It was dark for us, but hereafter, I think our eyes are opened, and we are hoping for the better.
Can you ask them what would happen if a landlord came back into this village now?
أكو دروب إشي داي بالبات تكنبلان هني من درام بيمج من تاسوا من يوناني مثلا.
بتاچالنا عينة تكون نكج بتاچالنا عينة بورفو فروتا كو إيه تفج.
We have using all our implements we have in our own hand, in our disposal. We use all this to kill him, to finish him, or to make him run away. We use stone, sticks, spear, and all these things to fight him. We will never accept him again in this place. That's what it is.
Now, the peasants work together on land once owned by landlords. The peasants here, given the opportunity to farm separately, chose to own the land collectively, sharing the labour and the produce. Their mentors, the students, join them in the fields, even learning with some difficulty how to wield a plough. Trusted by the peasants, they explain about exploitation and oppression, revealing buried truths about the past. Their message for the future is absorbed without question. In Ethiopia, 1 in every 3 children dies before the age of 1. Of those that survive, 9 out of every 10 grow up unable to read or write. The students are now taking education into the countryside for the first time. They learn the alphabet today. Tomorrow, they will be taught about politics and about socialism. These children of the revolution will grow up in a country profoundly different from the one which their parents knew.
The intention of the government is really to transform rural Ethiopia into some sort of a socialist agriculture. We really don't want to give the peasant piece of land and tell them that this is the end of the story. We really want to educate, to persuade them that until such time that the rural sector is really structured in a form of a socialist agriculture, we won't really conquer the problems that we are encountering. Actually, one time in the history of Ethiopia, we think to see collective farms in all parts of the country.
When you say collective farms, do you mean on the Chinese model, more or less?
On the Chinese model, more or less.
Does that mean that you have to superimpose on that a Chinese-style ideology, that the political forms must reflect that economic model?
Definitely, the way I see it, the structure is really the economic base, the politics and the ideology, the superstructure. If we really want to go to collectives, definitely, that is an inevitable, choice. We are going to more or less follow the ideology, correlating it with the Ethiopian, particular Ethiopian, situations.